know that when I was in my 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, all of the neighbors told everyone that, you see that boy right there? When he gets older, he's going directly to jail.
You're listening to The Final Say, Conversations with People Facing Death. I'm Deborah Jarvis, and The Final Say is the podcast where you can get comfortable talking about death and learn some things about life from people who are facing death. My guest today is Frank Marchand. Frank has been a plumber in Western Massachusetts for 48 years, and he's still plumbing. He began facing his own death about 8 years ago, and like many stories of this kind, it begins with a medical test.
At the time, I was 59 years old and had ignored the doctor's request for me to go in for a colonoscopy. I said, yeah, I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. And one of the nurses at the desk, she says, why is it that you're so afraid of this test? Because it's really not that invasive. You're knocked out. I said, well, I don't like anybody poking around down there. She says, well, I'll tell you what, if you don't do it and something happens, you're going to have 20 people poking around down there. So why don't you just get it done? And so I did. I went in and was at the colonoscopy appointment for probably half an hour, still kind of sedated when I came out. And I remember the doctor saying to me, I know cancer when I see it, and you've got it. You need to go for surgery right away. And 3 weeks later, I had 60% of my colon removed. And it was in recovery after that where the surgeon came in to confirm that, yes, I got all the cancer, that there's no cancer left. The margins are clear. However, it's metastasized, it's in your lymph system and your omentum, you're stage 4. I went through this period of time where I'm thinking, I can't have cancer. That's something that somebody else gets. You know, it's always somebody else because it's never going to affect me. And here I was with this weight on my chest saying, what happens next? That's where it began.
What was your dream of life as a child? When you were little Frank, what did you dream of doing or being?
I do know that when I was in my 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, all of the neighbors told everyone that, you see that boy right there? When he gets older, he's going directly to jail.
What?
I created so much trouble and so much havoc on the street that I lived, climbing trees and dropping butternuts on top of the tin roof where the old guy was sitting in his rocking chair on the porch. I tore the neighborhood apart. They were glad to see me move away.
Okay, Frank, but what was your dream? That's what other people thought about you, but what was your dream?
Actually, I found the greatest joy in playing in water. And I think that's what ended up me choosing the profession that I did, was trying to control water. You couldn't keep me out of it. Even in the wintertime. I mean, I'm out there with bare feet playing in the brook.
Wow.
I was enthralled by it. I couldn't control it. My intention each time I got in the water was to be able to say, ha ha, I'm your boss. And it never happened. It always won. So I'm in this profession now, and my job is to control it.
That's so interesting because you could be talking about cancer.
This is true.
Something that you want to control, and you've done a pretty good job for 9 years.
Right. Eventually it will win, just like the water will. My place in life is to try to exert whatever pressure I can to make something behave the way I want it to be.
Yeah. I think that we all do that, right?
Yeah.
You want to make things go the way that you want, and they don't always. So then how do you deal? What's been the biggest surprise of your life?
I would have to say, this is 13 years ago, committed bachelor after being divorced for 10 years and meeting the woman who is now my wife on the beach in the Dominican Republic in Punta Cana and just being bowled over. In 3 days, we knew that it was to be. And we were both in a point in our life where we were both available after having been married before. And she's here with me, and I love every second of it. She's been so supportive and so understanding. She's my blessing.
So describe that experience to me when you saw her. Was it like struck by lightning, or was it just sort of a slight attraction, or?
She was wearing a black bikini, and she was covered with sand, and her hair was all matted to her face. She'd been sweating in the sun, and we started talking. Just I don't even remember how the conversation started, basically, but she was French Canadian and spoke very little English, but we were able to communicate. And the following day, I couldn't remember her name. She told me it was a really strange sounding name, Manon, and I couldn't remember it. I got up the following morning and said to myself, "Well, she was delightful. Let's see what fate does, and maybe I'll meet her on the beach again today." And I got up late because usually I'm up, 7 o'clock, even on vacation. I got up at 9, and I knew that by the time I got to the beach, all the chaise lounges were going to be taken. So I got to the beach, and sure enough, all the lounges were taken. And I'm looking down the beach, and I see this person waving frantically. And I looked, I don't know if they're looking at me or whatever. And as I got closer, I realized it was her, and she'd gotten up early and saved a lounge for me next to her.
Oh, man.
We spent the day together. I was building sandcastles. She was romping in the surf. And we talked about getting together for dinner that night. And again, she's covered in sweat and sand. And so we made a promise to meet at 7 o'clock and go to dinner. The requirement of the resort was that you have to dress up for supper. So I'm in the reception area, and this woman, she walks in and like, oh my God, look at that woman. And she walks over, and her hair's all curly, and she's wearing makeup and a short skirt. And I'm like, oh my God, it's her. So the reversal was, usually you see somebody, and I said to myself, if I ever saw her like that first, I would be afraid to approach her.
Oh, wow.
But
Yeah.
it was backwards.
Yeah.
But then we went to the show together, and the following day, our vacations overlapped. So she was there for 4 of the days that I was there, and then she had to leave, and I was there for 3 more days, like kicking dirt and like, what happened? And I was so fearful that when she got home that was it. That we had that time together, and it was going to be all over. And when I got back, there were something like 62 emails from her.
Oh my
until I
gosh.
didn't bring my computer. And the striking thing was that she had taken a photo of me before we even met.
What?
Yeah. She said, I saw you and I knew right away.
Wow.
I'm looking at the itinerary of my schedule and realizing that photo was date stamped the day before we even met.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So she's clearly the most important person in your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What are you most proud of in your life?
The relationships that I've made. During all the years of helping people in my profession, who would ever guess that in the end, those would be the people who would be there first to help you?
Were there any surprises about who's been there and who hasn't been there?
Of course. And some of the people that I expected would be there
Mm-hmm.
were not. And
Mm.
some of the people I least expected to be there have been the most supportive. Uh, do you need a ride? Do you need, transportation? Do you need food? Do you need a trip to the pharmacy? Some of these are from people I would never expect.
Tell me what your beliefs are about death. Like, where do you go and, what happens afterward?
Well, you want the funny side or the serious side?
Well, let's start with the serious and then perhaps move to the funny.
Okay. I think that we're given this opportunity on this earth, in this time, in this space, to accomplish whatever we can so that we can move on to eternity or to the next phase, hopefully having reassured yourself that you were okay through that entire trip, that you maybe made an effect on someone else's life in a positive way or on many people's lives, so that when the time comes to actually have to depart this place, that even the undertaker is sad to see you go. We're given this opportunity, and way too many of us squander it. There's times in my life when I've squandered that too, and look back and try to figure out a way to right that wrong
Mm-hmm.
with a different person in a different way, to recognize a need that someone has and fulfill that, even though they're not expecting it. So that when I lie on my deathbed, I'm not saying to myself, I wish I had, I should have, why didn't I?
Mm-hmm.
I want to lay there and say, I did everything I could.
I was struck by what Frank just said about squandering an opportunity, but somehow being able to right that wrong with a different person in a different way. And I love this idea because it encompasses the belief that we are all one. So if I somehow squander an opportunity to help one person, but then can't make it up to them, I can do something for someone else. I don't know. It feels to me like it somehow rights the balance of energy in the universe. I like that. And Frank did something that I think illustrates this perfectly.
This is probably 4 years ago. My best friend, Ronnie, he ended up in the oncology ward with me having chemo. So we had the same doctor. So I said, hey, doc, can you schedule our treatments for the same time so we can be there together? He goes, I think I can make that happen. We sat next to each other, and when Ron was going downhill, we knew he wasn't going to last long.
Mm.
It was a summer, probably 4, maybe 5 years ago. People had been calling me saying, if you need a meal, if you need a ride, if there's anything we can do for you, please don't hesitate to call. I said, well, I'm not sure I'm going to need anything, but let me take down your name and phone number. And one day I looked at that list that had grown immensely. And I looked at it was a Wednesday. I looked at the extended forecast, and Saturday looked like the picture perfect day. So I talked to my wife and said, here's what I'd like to do. And she agreed. So I got on the phone and called the first person and said, you know how you offered to bring over a meal? Well, I'm really not in dire need, but if you'd like to make something up, that doesn't have to be fancy, and drop it by on Saturday around 1 o'clock, that would be great. Okay, for sure. We'll do that. And I hung up and I called the second person on the list. And we had tables and chairs set up. As the people started coming, they're thinking they were just bringing a meal for us. And 40 people had a potluck. And Ron was there, one of his last full meals. And it turned into this giant festival of people who were just there to love. It was a hug fest. I've always been one of those ones to notice that there's a glimmer of hope in everything. And sometimes it just takes takes the courage to do something like that to actually bring out the beauty and the joy of life.
Why do you think it's so hard for people to talk about death?
Because we know it's inevitable,
Mm-hmm.
but it's always avoidable. You can always change the subject.
Oh, you mean the subject's avoidable, but death is not avoidable,
That's correct. That's correct.
right?
So we rationalize by saying, I'm not going to die if I don't talk about it.
So.
But the reality is, yeah, you are going to, and yeah, you should talk about it because it brings consolation to other people as well as you. It's a fact of life that you're going to go through that door and you don't know what's on the other side of it.
Do you think with this diagnosis that you've gotten more comfortable talking about death?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All the things that cluttered my day, that made me oblivious to the beauty around me, the everyday changes, the beautiful changes, prioritizing who it is that you're spending your time with. Is
Mm.
that person sucking all of your energy and making you despondent or angry or jealous? Um, you start culling your collection. When you realize you don't have much time left, that's when you really start paying attention to all the things that you should have been paying attention to all along because the beauty is there.
Earlier in our conversation, Frank told me about his imaginary friend who he's had since he was a kid. You talked about your imaginary friend, and do you think that imaginary friend will come back to you toward the end of your life?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. He will transition me from wherever I'm at, whatever state I'm in, to where I'm going to next.
Does he have a name?
No, no, he doesn't want a name.
Okay. What does he look like?
All I see is, I'd hate to compare him to the Grim Reaper, but there's the hood and there's no face.
Really?
He basically is a counselor
And you've had this imaginary friend since you were a kid, right?
since I was like 2 or 3 years old. Yep.
Wow. And it didn't scare you to have a faceless person in a hood be your
Nope.
friend.
Nope.
Well, this is fantastic, actually.
He's the catalyst. He's the one who's getting me through all this.
Okay.
The hint of a voice that says, "Keep on going. You can do
Mhm.
this. This is what you're supposed to do."
Maybe having an imaginary friend as an adult seems silly or even crazy to you, but those times when a voice in your head comes up with a perfect piece of advice or wisdom, who is that? I mean, is that your higher self, a higher power, the Holy Spirit, your imaginary friend? I like this idea of asking for guidance from a source that is both outside yourself and within yourself. Think about it, both within and without. But then I love me a good paradox, and that's one of them. Is there anything that you would want someone who's listening to this podcast to know about death, about dying, about life, about love?
Even facing the worst adversity in your life, you have no clue how much energy you can summon from yourself. And when you find the strength to persevere, you'll find that other people want to get on that same wagon. And all of a sudden, you're not pushing that wagon, you're riding it, and other people are pushing it for you. And when you arrive at your destination, you may all be tired, but you're together.
Okay, wow. All that from a guy who people predicted would go straight to jail when he became an adult. I guess that just proves that there's no predicting. Is there any question I haven't asked you that you really would like to answer?
I don't think so. All I know is that I'm not scared. I've given up being afraid of where I'm going, what's going to happen afterwards, and concentrating on everything that this life has given me, and to look back and say, I had a pretty good ride.
Yeah. So that's our show for today. I'm Deborah Jarvis. Thanks for listening to The Final Say, Conversations with People Facing Death. Special thanks to Frank Marchand, who was my guest today. You are an amazing man, Frank, and I'll just do a little commercial for Marchand Plumbing. If you ever need Frank, he's in Western Massachusetts. Thanks also to Blue Dot Sessions, who provides music. And I think I'm going to let Frank have the final say today.
If you give from your heart, you receive it back tenfold. Tenfold.
Well, you already know from listening to this podcast that older people are not the only ones who die. But what does it mean to be older or old? Well, my friend Floyd Kennedy is answering this question with her fictional podcast, Am I Old Yet? So here's a taste of it for you.
Hi, Janie, what's up?
Mom, do you hear that thunder where you are?
Oh, yes, it's an announcement from Thunder's Mouth Theatre.
Oh, really?
I thought they were producing audio fiction as a podcast nowadays. You know, like theatre, but on the air rather than on the stage. Am I old yet?
No, Mom, of course you aren't. Don't be silly.
I'm talking about the podcast. That's what it's called. Am I old yet? And no, I'm not being silly. For goodness sake, Janie, how old do you have to be before you can call yourself old? No, don't answer that. It's a rhetorical question. Just head over to amioldYet.com to listen to the podcast.
Mom.
Janie.
Isn't that the one about us?
Oh, yes. Didn't I say?
And you can hear Am I Old Yet? Wherever you get your podcasts.